The day my mother's lawyer, by name Joshua, read her will, I sat in a gray office chair still wearing the black dress from her funeral. My brother Jerry sat across from me, already straightening his tie like a man who had already won something. Joshua Hoyt, thin and visibly uncomfortable, cleared his throat before reading. To my son Jerry, I leave the house, both savings accounts and my jewelry collection. He paused. I held my breath. To my daughter Rachael. Another pause. Longer. I leave nothing. The room went completely silent. Jerry didn't look surprised. He looked satisfied. The specific satisfaction of a man who had been waiting for exactly this moment. That's when something cold entered my chest. Not grief. Not confusion. Strategy. My name is Rachael Calloway. I'm 34, a forensic accountant, and the kind of woman who notices what other people miss. The number that doesn't add up, the pause before a lie, the smile that never reaches the eyes. I grew up in Raleigh, North Carolina, in a house that smelled like lavender and unspoken rules. My mother Dorcas was elegant, church-going, and completely devoted to my brother Jerry. I always told myself it was because he was firstborn, or louder, or simply easier to love. I built a quiet life anyway. A career I earned alone, an apartment filled with books, and a daughter named Mary who is 10 years old and thinks I hung every star personally. I never needed my mother's validation. But I always needed the truth. Jerry called me 3 days after the reading. Not to check on me. To discuss logistics, his word. I'll need you to clear your things from the storage unit by Friday. I asked him what storage unit. He said the one Mom paid for on Elmwood. Your old stuff. I had never heard of a storage unit on Elmwood. Had no old stuff there. I wrote the address down anyway and said nothing. Jerry has always mistaken my silence for weakness. That is his most expensive miscalculation. After hanging up, I sat with my coffee and stared at that address for a long time. Forensic accounting teaches you one critical thing. When something doesn't fit the known financial picture, you don't ignore it. You pull that thread until the whole fabric comes apart. The storage unit on Elmwood was registered in my mother's name. Unit 14B. The manager, a tired man named Cliff, confirmed my mother had rented it for 11 years. 11 years. Mary was 5 years old. 11 years ago. I paid the outstanding balance with my own card to gain access. Inside I expected old furniture. Boxes of Christmas decorations. Instead I found 3 locked filing cabinets. And stacked along the left wall, legal-sized envelopes, dozens of them, organized by year. The oldest dated back 36 years. The year I was born. I stood in that dim storage unit for a full minute, barely breathing. My mother was many things. Secretive, cold, controlling. But she was also methodical. And methodical people leave trails. Always. I didn't open anything that first day. I photographed everything instead. The filing cabinet labels, the envelope dates, the entire organization system. Forensic accountants don't grab evidence blindly. You document the scene before disturbing it. That night, after Mary fell asleep, I spread my photographs across the kitchen table. The envelopes were labeled with initials and dates. So my initials. Jerry. And a third set I didn't recognize. Ditch. I ran that through everything I knew about my family. No relatives. No friends with those initials. My father died when I was 4, a car accident my mother never discussed. His name was Daniel Calloway. I stared at those initials until midnight. Not DC. Completely different last name. Someone outside our known family entirely. My mother's oldest friend Vera opened her door Sunday morning looking surprised but not unwilling. Vera had known Dorcas since college. The kind of friendship that survives everything except honesty. I asked her directly. Who is Ditch? Vera's coffee cup stopped halfway to her mouth. She set it down carefully. Where did you see that name? I told her about the storage unit. Vera aged 5 years in 30 seconds. She closed her eyes slowly. Your mother made me promise, she said. I said she's gone, Vera. Long silence. Then. His name was David Harmon. He was your mother's first husband. Before your father. Before everything. The kitchen felt smaller suddenly. They had a child together, Rachael. My pulse stopped cold. Before you. I returned to Elmwood the next morning with bolt cutters. The filing cabinets opened to reveal 36 years of documentation. Bank statements. Property deeds. A marriage certificate. Dorcas and Webb and David Harmon. Married 1987. Divorced 1989. And a birth certificate. A child born March 1988. Will. Given up for adoption through a private agency in Raleigh 6 months after birth. I sat on the cold concrete floor and read everything twice. My mother had an entire life before us. A marriage, a child, a secret she buried so deeply that it became the foundation everything else was built upon. And somewhere in Raleigh, or anywhere really, there was a person walking around with my mother's blood who had absolutely no idea she had just died. I found the adoption agency records in the last cabinet drawer. Sealed legally, but my mother had kept a private copy of the original placement file. The child's adoptive family name, Morrison. First name given at adoption, James. James Morrison, born March 12, 1988. Adopted June 1, 1988. I hired a private researcher the next afternoon and gave her everything. She called back within 72 hours. He's in Raleigh. Has been his whole life. He's 37. Works in construction management. He doesn't know. I asked if she was certain. His adoption records are sealed. Unless someone contacts him directly. He has no reason to suspect anything. I thanked her and hung up the phone. Then I sat completely still for a long time. Then I called the lawyer. Joshua Hoyt's office. Joshua Hoyt sounded uncomfortable from the first syllable. I told him what I'd found. Silence. Then, Rachael, I need to be very careful about what I say. I said, Joshua, I'm a forensic accountant. I've spent a week inside my mother's private filing system. Be as careful as you need. We'll wait. More silence. Then he said something that rearranged my entire understanding of the past month. Your mother came to me 6 weeks before she passed. She wanted to change the will. Jerry found out. My throat tightened. He talked her out of it. Joshua hesitated. I don't know what he said to her exactly. But she came in looking frightened, Rachael. Your mother did not frighten easily. My hand gripped the phone until my knuckles hurt. What had she changed it to, Joshua? Joshua told me my mother's revised will left the house equally between Jerry and me. The account split 3 ways. The third portion designated for James Morrison if he could be found. Jerry had known about James. Of course he had. He was 12 when Dorcas gave the baby up. Old enough to understand, young enough to weaponize it decades later. When she tried to finally correct 36 years of silence, Jerry had used that secret against her. He threatened to tell everyone, Joshua said quietly. Your mother was a proud woman. The church, the neighborhood, she couldn't bear it. I set the phone down and stared at the wall. My brother had blackmailed our dying mother into silence. Into erasing me from everything she'd built. I sat with that truth for a long time. I didn't confront Jerry immediately. I prepared. 2 weeks of careful preparation, because confronting someone like Jerry without documentation is just noise, and noise is easy to dismiss. I audited everything I could legally access. The estate accounts, property records, the storage unit fees Jerry had already claimed as estate expenses. And there it was, buried the way wrongdoing always is. Not hidden dramatically, just quietly tucked where no one was expected to look. Jerry had been withdrawing from my mother's accounts for 3 years before she died. Small amounts initially, then larger. Over 38 months, he had removed exactly $214,000. My mother, declining cognitively in her final years, almost certainly couldn't track it. I documented every single transaction, every date, every amount, every account number. Joshua Hoyt called me on a Tuesday. His voice was different, less cautious, more urgent. Rachael, I need to see you today. In person. I drove to his office during my lunch break. He closed the door before I sat down and placed a manila envelope on the desk between us. It was sealed with a wax stamp I recognized immediately. My mother's personal seal, the one she reserved for formal correspondence. Joshua said, "She gave this to me 14 months ago with specific instructions. It was only to be opened if Jerry contested any portion of the estate, or if someone came to me with evidence of financial misconduct." He slid it across the desk. "Both conditions have now been met." My hands were not entirely steady when I finally picked it up. Inside the envelope were 2 documents. The first, a signed, notarized affidavit from my mother describing Jerry's financial withdrawals in precise detail. She had known. She had documented everything herself. Dates, amounts, account numbers, with the precision of a woman who had raised a forensic accountant and quietly learned something by proximity. The second document was a letter. Handwritten. 3 pages. Addressed to me specifically. I read the first line and had to stop. "Rachel, if you're reading this, then you were brave enough to look. I always knew you would be the one who looked." I pressed my hand hard against my mouth. Joshua quietly slid a box of tissues across the desk and said absolutely nothing. Some silences are the most respectful thing a person can offer another person. My mother's letter explained everything with the bluntness of a woman who knew she was writing to someone who would verify every word. She wrote about David Harmon, the first marriage, the baby given up under enormous pressure from her own parents. She wrote about the shame that calcified into silence over decades. She wrote about Jerry discovering the truth at 17 from an overheard phone call, and holding it quietly ever since, deploying it only when he needed leverage. Then she wrote about me. "You never needed my approval, Rachel. You built everything yourself." I told myself that was fine, that you were strong enough. But the truth is I was afraid of you. Afraid you would look too closely and find everything I had spent a lifetime burying. I am deeply sorry. The third page of the letter was the hardest to read. My mother wrote about Mary, my daughter, her granddaughter, and how watching Mary grow up had cracked something open inside her. "She looks at you the way I should have looked at you. Completely. Without conditions. I didn't know how to do that. My own mother never showed me. I passed that emptiness to you and called it strength." She named the adoption agency. She had written a separate letter for James, also held by Joshua, in case he was ever found. She had been trying, in the only way she knew, methodically through paperwork and legal channels, to correct everything before she ran out of time. And Jerry had nearly stopped her. I folded the letter carefully. Then I called my researcher and said, "Find James Morrison." Today. Jerry came to my apartment unannounced on a Thursday evening. Mary was at a friend's house. Thank God for that. He walked in looking the way he always does when he's nervous. Too controlled, too still, too careful with his hands. He said, "I know you went to see Joshua." I said, "I know what you took from Mom's accounts." He sat down without being invited. "She wanted me to have it." She told me. I interrupted him. "She documented it herself, Jerry. Dates, amounts, her own handwriting. Notarized 14 months ago." His face shifted. The control slipped, just a flicker, and underneath it I saw something I recognized from our childhood together. Not confidence. Fear dressed as confidence. He said, "You don't want to do this." I said, "I've already done it." He left without another word. That silence scared me more than shouting would have. 2 days after Jerry's visit, Mary's school called. She hadn't been picked up, except she had, by someone the front desk described as a man who said he was family. My heart stopped completely. I called the police before I finished pulling out of my parking garage. 37 minutes of absolute terror. 37 minutes of replaying every decision I'd made. Every moment I'd chosen the truth over my own safety. Then my phone rang. Mary's voice, "Mom. Uncle Jerry brought me for ice cream. He said you said it was okay." I told her to stay exactly where she was and hand the phone to Jerry. He answered calmly. "Don't escalate this, Rachel." I said very quietly, measuring every syllable. You just made the single worst decision of your entire life. I meant it completely. I filed a police report that night. Not just for the unauthorized pickup, for everything. The financial documentation. Joshua's full testimony, my mother's affidavit, the revised will that was never filed, the years of hidden withdrawals. My attorney, Carla Sims, had the energy of someone who had won impossible cases through sheer refusal to lose. She called Jerry's action with merry custodial interference with intent to intimidate. The DA's office received our complete documentation package by Friday morning. Jerry's attorney contacted Carla before noon, faster than I expected, which told me Jerry was far more rattled than he'd appeared at my apartment door. Carla called me afterward. His lawyer asked if you'd consider settling quietly. Said no. She said, "That's exactly what I told him." I could hear her smiling through the phone. The investigation moved faster than I expected, partly because financial crimes with thorough documentation don't require much detective work. They require mathematics, and mathematics is patient and absolute. The DA's office confirmed $214,000 in unauthorized withdrawals. They also uncovered something I had not found. A second account Jerry had opened in my mother's name 18 months before her death, using a power of attorney obtained while she was in early cognitive decline. He'd moved money from that account steadily for over a year. Total misappropriated funds. Closer to $340,000. Carla called it elder financial abuse, which is precisely what it was. My mother, who had always seemed impenetrable and immovable, had been quietly robbed by her own son while losing her ability to fight back. That was the cruelest part. Jerry was arrested on a Wednesday morning. I know because his neighbor, who had my number from a shared neighborhood watch group, texted me a photo. I want to be completely honest about what I felt in that moment, because stories like this often get told with a clean, satisfying rush of justice, and that's not what it was. It was grief. Grief for my mother, who deserved better children than either of us managed to be in our different ways. Grief for 34 years of circling each other in that cold house and calling it family. Grief for James Morrison, who would now receive a phone call about a mother he never knew, alongside a criminal case involving a brother he'd never met. None of it was clean. None of it felt like winning. It was just finally painfully true. James Morrison agreed to meet me at a coffee shop downtown. He was tall, with my mother's jawline and her precise, careful way of holding himself, like he was conserving something. He had spent 48 hours reading everything I'd sent him before agreeing to come. He arrived with prepared questions I couldn't always answer. We sat for 3 hours. He cried once, briefly, when I showed him a photograph of Dorcas from the 1980s, young before the armor had fully formed. He said, "She looks like someone who was frightened." Said she was. Most of her life. He nodded slowly. He wasn't angry the way I had expected. He was quiet the way Mary gets when she's processing something enormous. I recognized it the instant I saw it. We shared that, at least. That quiet. Joshua Hoyt petitioned probate court to honor my mother's revised will. The notarized affidavit and her letter constituted sufficient evidence of intent, especially combined with documentation of Jerry's coercion. The judge agreed. The house was divided equally between James and me. The accounts, after Jerry's portion was frozen pending criminal proceedings, were split between us. But the thing that broke me completely wasn't the money or the property. It was the separate letter my mother had written for James, the one Joshua gave him privately. Afterward, James found me in the courthouse hallway. His eyes were red. He didn't speak for a long moment. Then, she said she thought about me every single day. I reached out and took his hand. "I believe her," I said. And I meant it with everything I had. Jerry pleaded guilty 8 months later to elder financial abuse and fraud. His attorney negotiated. He received 3 years probation, mandatory full repayment, and community service hours. No prison, which Carla had warned me was likely given his clean record and the repayment plan. I watched him in the courtroom. He looked older somehow, smaller than I remembered. He glanced at me once. I didn't look away, but I gave him nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, no acknowledgement. Anger would have meant I still expected something from him. I didn't. The judge asked if I wanted to make a victim impact statement. I stood and said only this. My mother spent her life managing what other people thought of her. My brother used that to control her. I'm glad she tried to tell the truth at the end. Then I sat down. Mary met James for the first time at a backyard barbecue at his house in September. She decided within 45 minutes that he was her favorite uncle, and told him this directly, with the complete social fearlessness of a child who has only ever been loved without conditions. James laughed so hard he nearly dropped his plate. Later he pulled me aside quietly. You know what gets me? She knew nothing about any of this and she just walked right up to me. Smiled. She trusts people until they give her a reason not to. He looked at her chasing his dog across the yard. Your mom would have loved watching that. My throat tightened. Yeah, I said. She would have. We stood there together in the quiet. Two strangers from the same silence, finally building something new. It's been 2 years. The family house sold last spring. James and I split the proceeds. He put a down payment on a place for his family. I started a college fund for Mary. The money my mother left became the future she couldn't quite build herself. Mary asked me recently why I never speak badly about Grandma Dorcas. I thought about it for a long time before answering. 'Cause she was trying bug. Right up until the end, she was trying to get it right. Mary accepted that the way children accept true things, without needing more explanation. I've learned to do the same. Not forgiveness exactly. Something more honest than that. Something quieter. Something that doesn't require the other person to change or apologize or even understand. Something that simply lets you breathe again without carrying all that weight.